Welcome back to This is a Commander channel, where this is a Commander channel, and today I'm going to be talking about Commander Tough Rules and Cool Interactions, episode 184. Today's episode is going to take a look at the cleanup step and a trick that you can pull off to stop you from losing the game to certain kinds of win condition type cards. So let's jump right into it. The kinds of cards that this trick will help to save you from here are these sorts of at the beginning of your upkeep, if you meet this condition, you win the game type cards. The earliest part in a turn that a player receives priority is during the upkeep, at which point these kinds of triggers will have already been added to the stack, and unless you have a stifle type effect to counter a triggered ability that is on the stack, well, removing the permanent with that ability on it will not help save you from losing to these cards, to these effects. So the obvious answer here is to answer these permanents before their controller makes it to their upkeep. But often, this can be problematic if permanents that they control have protection from spells like Heroic Intervention, being one of the most common to see. It is an instant that says, permanents you control gain hexproof and indestructible until end of turn. There are lots of other great protection spells out there that protect one specific card, like these three that can save any permanent, not just creatures. So let's say you have tried to answer their Hellkite Tyrant. It has one of those at the beginning of your upkeep, win the game type things. So you try to answer it with a Swords to Plowshares, and they respond with the Heroic Intervention. And so in response, you cast a Path to Exile, to which they now cast their Restoration Magic. And you, sadly, are all out of answers. Well, there might still be hope before we get to their turn. Through combat, you manage to draw some more cards, and one of them is another instant that can deal with their Tyrant. However, it's still hexproof, and again, once you pass your turn, the earliest that you could try to answer their Tyrant will be too late to stop that trigger. So clearly, your fate has been sealed. Or has it? There is a way around this involving the cleanup step, but it does require a little bit of work to pull it off. So let's look at the cleanup step, and we'll first head to the CR in section 514.1 that says, first, if the active player's hand contains more cards than their maximum hand size, normally 7, they discard enough cards to reduce their hand size to that number. This turn-based action doesn't use the stack. And then, the next rule is CR 514.2 that states, second, the following actions happen simultaneously. All damage marked on permanents, including phased-out permanents, is removed, and all until end of turn, and this turn affects end. This turn-based action doesn't use the stack. So this is when those protection spells, like the intervention, would be wiped from that player's permanents. And then we have the next rule in the CR, which is 514.3, and it says that normally no player receives priority during the cleanup step, so no spells can be cast and no abilities can be activated. However, this rule is subject to the following exception. And then that exception is CR 514.3a that says, at this point, the game checks to see if any state-based actions would be performed and or any triggered abilities are waiting to be put onto the stack, including those that trigger at the beginning of the next cleanup step. If so, those state-based actions are performed, then those triggered abilities are put on the stack, and then the active player gets priority. Players may cast spells and activate abilities. Once the stack is empty and all players pass in succession, another cleanup step begins. So, what does all this mean? Well, it means that if you can cause a trigger to happen during the cleanup step, you will get priority, which means you will have one other chance to answer that game-winning card before it gets a chance to trigger on its controller's upkeep. There are quite a few ways to do this, but some of the easier ones that I can think of off the top of my head that don't require a whole lot of extra effort would be if you're having to discard down to hand size as part of that first part of the cleanup step. Well, if you control a card like either Bone Miser or Braylon Skyshark Rider, then you can pull it off. They both have triggered abilities for whenever you discard a card, so if you discard down to hand size, these will trigger and they'll wait to get added to the stack. Then the game moves to the next part of the cleanup step, in which it will remove damage marked on permanents, as well as end all the things that say until end of turn, like hexproof given to it from restoration magic and heroic intervention. And then we will get to the part where those triggers enter the stack and priority gets passed around the table, and you can cast your Anguished Unmaking or whatever spell you ended up drawing, and then try to remove the Tyrant on the very same turn that it was actually given hexproof. So that was just one example. I would love to hear from you guys. What are some other cool things that you can think of that take advantage of this little trick of getting like multiple cleanups happening during the cleanup step? Maybe someone giant growthed a creature, buffing its toughness to survive something like a massacre worm or something like that, to survive something like that, and then you can just wait again to get it to clean up multiple times, and that way you get it small again to lightning bolt it or something like that. So I'd love to hear what you guys think. Anyhow, that's all I've got for today's episode. As always, I hope that all of you have found this video to be entertaining at least, and I hope that a few of you have even learned something about the crazy rules in this great game of Magic. I don't know what sometimes I have a brain fart in these outros. Whatever. Have a good one. Ta-ta.